Toastmasters and guests. We have club elections coming up. And since I've actually been many of the officer roles in the past, I would like to help you all understand what they are and think about how you might want to take one of these roles going forward. So starting with the president is the leader, as one would imagine. He's the visionary. He or she guides the club in a direction, hopefully having a vision and leading it forward and supervising all the other roles. When I talk about the duties of these various positions, you should think of, as I told my kids, when I asked my son to pick up the ball, and then my daughter went and picked up the ball, he was upset because I had asked him to do something and he couldn't do it. But I was just happy. I wanted that ball cleaned out of the room. So if the role has you being responsible for it, it just means you're responsible that it gets done, not necessarily that you do it. On the other hand, there's the responsibility of a teacher. If a teacher assigns homework to someone, it's usually not good enough to have someone else go do that homework for you. That is a responsibility of you. Now, there are some responsibilities for these particular duties, but in general, most of the responsibilities of these roles can be done by others. And in various clubs, there are different relationships and histories of who does the various things. But these are the responsibilities of the roles. So the president is responsible for the mission of the club. And he or she also is represents the club in the higher level. They're in Toastmasters, there are areas of which are groups of clubs, and then divisions, which are groups of areas, and districts, which are groups of divisions, and representing the club to the higher level. So there are often meetings that take place at the higher levels that the president would represent the club in. The next level of responsibility is the vice president of education. So they would take over for the president if the president is absent or not able to serve. The vice president of education, which is currently what I'm serving as, is responsible for the education, effectively, of the club. The members, making sure they're learning, they're progressing in paths, that they're doing speeches, that they prepared, if they have questions. The vice president of education is generally the one primarily responsible for supervising the pathways, our electronic version of the paths and education in Toastmasters currently. So approving when people get to a next level. The other people also, the secondary responsibilities for that are done by the president and the secretary. Next is the vice president of membership. They're responsible for the members, having people become members, having people stay as members, keeping track of who the members are, and hoping that we get more members. Then there's the vice president of public relations. As the name implies, they're out trying to get people, letting people know about the club, hoping people to get into the club. So the way I see it is it's a teamwork. The vice president of public relations tries to get people in the door. And then once they're in the door, it's the vice president membership responsibility to try to have them become a member if it's appropriate for them. The secretary, the club secretary, the official term, is records and correspondence. They keep track of the charter, the constitution, and all other records and documents. And they keep minutes of the meetings and the executive board meetings. And so if there's a question, what was decided by the club in a meeting, they would have the records. And a question that came up for me earlier is, what was the word of the day in the last two meetings, which I need to ask the secretary to look up after the meeting. The club treasurer is responsible for the finances. So that's collecting dues, making sure that we paid if we've collected the dues, that the dues have gone, the appropriate ones have gone to Toastmasters International. Also paying things. In this club, we are fortunate to get to use this room for free. Sometimes we've had to use other locations that some of which we might have had to pay for. There are some expenses. We've bought signs, some meetings we have food. So the treasurer is responsible for paying for the food and keeping the bank balance, collecting dues. We bought pens and timing lights. Those are expenses that the club has. As I said, and some other clubs do have to pay for their location, or every meeting will pay for food for everyone if that's what the club does. The Sergeant at Arms. I consider the Sergeant at Arms the host. They are responsible for setting up the room and keeping track of the physical things in the room. So the things you see, the papers, the signs, the gavel. We store them here in this particular club. We store it here. Sometimes they have to take it home between meetings. Some meetings, they are responsible for actually the contract with whatever organization is to get the meeting room or location. They are also responsible for greeting people as they come in. New members, potential that the VPPR got to come in the door. They would greet and make sure it felt warm as they came in and hand them off to the vice president of membership to try to get them to become members, if all is working well. Since I still have some time, I would like to go over the roles of the meeting. Now, some clubs have the roles that I've just described, the officer roles. They have elections and the terms are every 6 months, and some clubs every year. Our club has been doing every year. So these terms, you're signing up for this, or volunteering for these roles, would be a term of 1 year. The roles for the meetings change every week, and we like to rotate between all the members to give everybody a chance to do everything. So going through the roles of a meeting, the Toastmaster of the day works as the MC. Their job actually starts a week before as they plan the meeting. The Vice President of Education in our club and in most others will assign people, actually that's not true, most others. Our club, the Vice President of Education assigns roles and gets approval of who is going to be the roles, but then that is then handed off to the Toastmaster of the day a week before the meeting, or more sometimes, for the Toastmaster of the day to organize the meeting, to contact the various people and their roles, make sure everyone's on track if they have questions, organize the logistics. They print out the agenda when we are meeting in person or send it out on email when we're meeting on Zoom. And then during the meeting, acting as an MC, starting the meeting, introducing the various other people and roles. The speakers generally prepare a speech. Hopefully they've worked on it for at least a week. We generally give people notice at least 3 or 4 weeks in advance. So you have time to work on the speech and prepare it. There is Pathways, an electronic education system of Toastmasters to help you with the speech. There are various levels of speeches and various, I wouldn't say topics. There are some with specific topics, but in general, you get to pick what you're talking about, but the project will have some sort of focus on it. For example, in the old system, one would be gestures. And so you can pick whatever you want to talk about, but you would try to incorporate gestures in that speech. But you get to pick the topic and write the speech. Then there are the evaluators of the speeches. They listen to the speech, they critique the speech, hopefully giving suggestions what the person could do better, but also what they did well. so that they can give a better speech and learn. The other roles, there's the grammarian. In some clubs, this is called the Wizard of Oz. In our club, we combine these, the grammarian and the Wizard of Oz, that the grammarian listens for Oz, ums, other word ticks, and incorrect uses of grammar, but also nice, unusual uses of grammar in our club to point them out, and unusual words. Also in our club, we have the word of the day that the grammarian picks, presents, and listens for during the meeting. And I've not been very astute in using that so far. There's the timer, who keeps, I say, is a partner with all the speakers in keeping them on track so that they can speak to however long they want. They often have lights or sometimes just cards. You can use index cards. And the typical colors are green, yellow, and red. And the hardest part of being a timer is remembering to start the timer when people talk, and then you sometimes get caught up in what their speech and listening to it that you forget to look down and change the cards. Otherwise, it is fairly easy. There are actually applications. I have an application for Android that helps, and it changes the screen, various colors to remind you, or I've even used the phone to show in place of timing lights. Most clubs have a stopwatch if you don't have your own clock or watch, and lighting. There's the topics master. The topics master is responsible for the impromptu section of the meeting. They prepare, I would say, 4 or 5 questions per meeting, and they pick the theme of the meeting to go with the theme of their questions. They ask the questions. The encouraged way to ask the question is to ask the question and then call on the person so that for a moment, everybody feels the heat and has to think about what to say until the one person is called. Some do it differently, but that is the encouraged way to do it. Then there's the general evaluator. The general evaluator leads in our club the last section of the meeting, which is for the evaluations, the grammarian and the timer to give their reports. The general evaluator is also responsible for evaluating the entire meeting. They generally don't focus on what the speech evaluators focused on, which was just the speaker, but everything else, including the evaluations themselves. Some clubs have a listener, an official listener, and they give a listener's report. And at the end of the meeting, they will have taken notes and said, oh, who is it in the club that said this during the meeting? Or what in Andy's speech did he say was his favorite color? And if you were taking notes and remember what he said, or whatever the question is, and people will remember and call out, it's a way to keep people paying attention. And it's a nice role that some clubs have. That I believe is all the roles of officers and meeting roles. As I said, we do like to switch through them. Does anyone have any questions about what I presented? Yes.
Yes, out of all those roles, what is your favorite role? Even counting like your favorite role in meetings, and then what's your favorite officer position? And what do you think is the most important one?
So I don't know if my favorite is what I consider the most important. I do consider the vice president education the most important, which is my current role, because I think they are responsible for keeping everyone going forward. It's also, of the roles, of the officer roles, the one that takes the most time, having done most of them. It has more preparation between the meetings to make sure everything is scheduled and going on. I think my favorite role during a meeting is the timer. I am comfortable with technology and using timers and phones and like the colors. I've thought in my mind of designing some colored lights. And I would do it differently as an engineer, but definitely appreciate what we have. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and my favorite, I agree with you, the education is important, but also membership. They, in order to get distinguished club, membership is the key.
It is very important, and especially in this club and at this time, we are in need of members. More members, I think, would make us more comfortable. We have one speaker lined up for today. We've had 2 speakers. I think with more members, we could go back to, as we have in the past, had 3 speeches planned for most meetings. So I'm definitely looking forward to having more members.
Understand you mentioned members. What's your favorite way to attract members or and get something more better?
So I would say a lot of that responsibility, or some of that responsibility, definitely lands on the VP of PR to get the word out for people to know about that we exist. If they don't know we exist, they can't come find out more about us. So there are various ways to getting the word out that the VP PR is ultimately responsible for. Then hopefully bringing people in, then the VP membership and others greet them as they come in. The club Toastmasters evaluate various clubs. They have a program called DCP, which stands for Distinguished Club Program. And there are various criteria that they give to each of the clubs to score them. And a lot of it has to do with people progressing in their paths and their educational progress. So that so many members made it past this level, so many members made it past this level. They give you various points. And I think it's a score of 10 or 12, paying their dues is responsible. Gaining new members is one of the criteria. So the way this works is you can be a distinguished club if you have 5 of the 10 or 12 criteria. And then you move up, you can be, distinguished, club president's distinguished, or I forgot all the terms they have, super distinguished, as you get more and more of these criteria. And right now, the club's biggest challenge is to actually, as a prerequisite for that, is we effectively need a minimum number of members or a minimum number of new members if we're below a certain level. Which has been in the last couple of years the challenge for this club.
And for many clubs.
And for many clubs. But we generally do have many of the other criteria of a healthy club. Of people progressing in education. It's good. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.